Hello friends. In last few lectures we discussed about the process of the water absorption by the plant, how plant absorb the water and how the ascending of the water takes place, how water it is uplifted by different forces, cohesive force, adhesive force, and what you call that the pulling force, isn't it? And later on, the water it is entered into the what we call it as that the use of the plant. So the question is, what happens with that water? Whether the whole amount of the water which is absorbed by the plant is utilized by the plant. In fact, most of the water which is absorbed by the plant, that water is lost by the plant, isn't it? And in this lecture, we are discussing about that process through which the plant loses the water. And the name of that process is called as the transpiration. Getting it? Now, what is transpiration then? As I told you that the plant absorb much more amount of the water, and near about 95 to 99% of the water which is absorbed by the plant, out of this water, 95 to 99% of the water is lost by the plant in the form of water vapors, isn't it? And rest of the water, it is lost by the plant by different process. That is different process, what we call it the guttation. Okay, but through this process that is called as the transpiration, most of the water it is lost in the form of water vapors, isn't it? Stephen Halls in the year of 1727, for the first time he studied that the plant loses the water in the form of the water vapors, and most of the water loss takes place through this type of the loss of water, isn't it? And he proposed the term for the first time, and that term is called as transpiration, isn't it? According to him, the transpiration is the process of evaporation of the water from the aerial parts of the plants, isn't it? So plant absorb the water with lot of efforts, isn't it? And it loses the water by their aerial parts, isn't it? Now question is, what amount of the water is lost by the plant per day? And the answer is, whatever may be the weight of that particular plant, that much amount of the water is lost by the plant per day. It means that if a plant having a weight of 5 kilogram, then it will lose the water 5 kilogram per day, isn't it? Now, if plant absorb the water with lot of efforts, then why the water loss takes place in the plant, isn't it? So, according to scientist Curtis, the transpiration is a necessary evil, isn't it? It is unavoidable process for the plant. Why it is unavoidable? Because plant gets the minerals and nutrients and all other elements through the water, along with the water. So if plant requires this element and minerals or nutrients, then plant should have absorbed the water, and along with that water only plant will get the mineral and nutrients. So this process is continued, isn't it? Continuously taking place for getting the mineral and nutrient. So as a result of that, the amount of water in the plant it will be increased. Getting it? And this amount of the water, excess amount of the water, should thrown outside the plant body. And this process in which the plant is thrown outside the plant body, this process, what we call it as the transpiration. Here I have quoted few definitions of the transpiration. Let us see one by one. Okay. The first definition is the transpiration is the physiological process by which the excess water is lost from the living tissues of the plant in the form of water vapors. This process is called as transpiration. The another definition is the transpiration is the process of water movement through a plant and its evaporation from the aerial parts such as the leaves, stem, and the flower. It means that the movement of the water in the plant and its evaporation through the aerial part of the plant, like leaves and flowers and whatever called stem, isn't it? This process is called as the transpiration. According to scientist Mitchell in the year of 1978, he defined the transpiration as the transpiration is the process by which water vapor leaves the living plant body and it enter in the atmosphere, isn't it? So all these definitions draws a single meaning of the transpiration, and the meaning is the transpiration is the process in which the excess amount of the water is lost by the plant through the other parts in the form of water vapors, isn't it? This is the definition of the transpiration. Now, is that what are these parts? Or from here, the actual process of the transpiration takes place. So the aerial parts of the whole young plant through which the transpiration takes place are these are the three aerial parts. The first, that is called as the lenticle. Second, it is cutin, and third one is the stomata. So these three parts, three aerial parts are there through which the water loss takes place. Okay, so on the basis of these parts, on the basis of the which part is involved in the process of the transpiration, there are three different types of the transpiration. Okay, so on the basis of the passage through which the plants do out water in form of water vapors, transpiration is of three different types. Okay, when it takes place, water loss is through the stomata, then that type of transpiration is called as transpiration. When water loss takes place through the cuticle, then that type of transpiration is called as cuticular transpiration. And when water loss takes place through the lenticles, then that type of the transpiration is called as lenticular transpiration. Okay, let us see one by one. Now, the stomatal transpiration. As I told you that the stomatal transpiration is such type of the transpiration in which the water loss takes place through the stomata. Okay, so this type of the transpiration, it occurs only during the daytime in presence of sunlight. This is most important. Stomata remains open during the daytime only. Okay, so this stomatal transpiration takes place during the daytime in presence of the sunlight, and the maximum amount of water loss takes place through this stomata or through such type of the transpiration that is called as the stomatal transpiration. Of total water loss takes place in the process of the transpiration, 80 to 90% water loss takes place through this stomatal transpiration. Okay, and no doubt, this in this transpiration, the water loss takes place in the form of the water vapors. Okay, you can see here, this is the internal structure of the leaf where this spongy and it is called as the stomatal transpiration. Okay, that is a cuticular transpiration. We all know about the cuticle, that the epidermis of the plant, it may be epidermis of the stem or epidermis of the leaf, both upper epidermis and lower epidermis. The epidermis secretes some waxy substance over it, isn't it? And a waxy substance is accumulated over the surface of the epidermis, upper and lower epidermis. That waxy substance is called as cuticle. And the function of this waxy substance is to protect the plant from the infection, particularly the infection of microbes. And the another function of the cuticle is to prevent the excess amount of the water loss. Although the epidermis is there for preventing the water loss, then also some amount of the water loss takes place through this cuticle. Getting it? So whenever there are the cracks, wherever the cracks are formed to the cuticle, through these cracks the water loss takes place. Okay, and this water loss is no doubt it is in the form of water vapors. So whenever the water loss takes place through these cracks of the cuticle, then such type of the water loss, such type of the transpiration is called as cuticular transpiration. And a less amount of the water loss takes place through these cuticles, that is 5 to 10% water loss takes place through the cuticle. Okay, the next step of the transpiration, it is a lenticular transpiration. Now question is that what are these lenticles? You might have observed the apple fruit or any type of the fruit. If you observe the wall of that fruit, then you can find small tiny dotted like structures. These are the pores, and these pores are nothing but the lenticles. The same type of the pores are also found to be present on the bark of the stem, isn't it? And these tiny small pores present on the bark of the stem, it is called as lenticles. You can see here on the stem, there are some dotted structure. Okay, this is the internal structure of that particular layer, and this is the lenticle, small part. These lenticle, however, the water loss or the transpiration occurs through the lenticles, which are the small openings in the cork tissue. Then this type of the water loss is called as lenticular transpiration, isn't it? And such type of the transpiration takes place in very less amount of total water loss through the transpiration. Out of the total water loss through transpiration, only 0.1% of the water loss takes place through the lenticular transpiration. And no doubt, in this type of the transpiration, also the water loss takes place in the form of water vapors. Okay. Now, as we have studied that the maximum type of the water loss takes place through the stomata, isn't it? And stomatal transpiration is very important as per as the water loss takes place in the plant is concerned. So let us see about the stomata. What is stomata? When we observe the peeling of any leaf, if we take a peeling of the leaf and we observe that peeling, that epidermis under the microscope, then what we will find that there are many small pore-like structures present. These are evenly distributed in the epidermal layer of the leaf. And these small pore-like structures are called as stomata. So the stomata are the minute openings of the leaf, generally found in the epidermis of the leaf, both upper epidermis as well as toward the lower epidermis. Getting it? So sometimes these stomata are also found to be present on the stem. Getting it? Particularly the green stem, which contain the stomata. Okay, or small openings. Now, if we are talking about the stomata in the leaves, then the number of the stomata uh, on the surface of the leaf, it is different in different plant. Then when we examine the surfaces of the epidermis of different plant, and we calculate or we pointed out the number of the stomata present per millimeter square area of the leaf or the surface of the leaf, then we can found that in case of the wheat plant, the number of stomata found to upper surface is 50, and the number of stomata found toward the lower surface are the 40, isn't it? Per millimeter square area. Remember it, per millimeter square area. So the upper surface contains more number of stomata than the lower surface of the epidermis. The same when we observe in the dicot plant, then in case of the sunflower plant, we will found that 120, near about 120 stomata are present on the upper surface, and 175 stomata are present towards its lower surface. Again, I will tell you that this number is per millimeter square area. Okay. In case of the plant geranium, this number is having much more difference. Towards the upper surface, there is 29 stomata, and toward the lower surface, there are 179 stomata. Okay, what we can conclude from these numbers? We can conclude that in case of the modern plants, less amount of stomata are found toward the upper epidermis, whereas the more number of stomata these are found toward the lower epidermis. In case of the dicot plant, the more number of the stomata these are found to the upper epidermis, whereas the less number of stomata they are found to present towards its upper epidermis. Okay, so to the lower epidermis, less number of the stomata, more number of the stomata are found to the lower epidermis, and the less number of the stomata these are found to the upper epidermis in case of the dicotyledon plant. Okay, when we are talking about the size of the stomata, getting it, size of the stomata, then the size of the stomata, uh, it is a different in open state and in its closed state. The size of the open stomata is different, isn't it? How it different you can see here. If we study a stomata of one plant, then the size of the stomata of particularly open stomata, it is 27 to 45 micron in length, and the width of this open stomata is 23 to 28 micron. Whereas when this stomata becomes closed, the size of the closed stomata is, let us see, 27 to 45 micron in length, and the width of the closed stomata is 10 to 13 micron, not 33. Please correct it. It is a 10 to 13 micron. So it is clear that the length of the stomata, it is same in case of the open as well as closed stomata, but the width of the stomata is different. Okay, the width of the opened stomata is always more than that of the width of the closed stomata. Okay, now let's see stomata. Okay, how is the structure of the stomata, how it is formed? Remember that the stomata, it is formed by stomatal complex particular, it is formed by three main components. Main and important, what we studied about the stomata is, the stomata, these are the small openings. Okay, these are the small pores found to be present or in the epidermis or epidermal layer of the leaf as well as stem. So the main and important component of the stomatal complex is the stomatal pore, isn't it? The first. The second important component of the stomatal complex is the guard cell. And the third important component of the stomatal cell is a subsidiary cell, isn't it? So this stomatal pore, it is covered by a pair of guard cells, isn't it? The stomatal pore, it is covered by a pair of guard cells. So each stomata, it is covered, or the stomatal pore, it is covered by a pair of guard cell. Getting it? So this is one guard cell, this is another guard cell, and these two guard cells covers the stomatal pore, and this is the stomatal pore which is covered by two guard cells. Getting it? And around these guard cells, there exists the special type of the epidermal cells, and these epidermal cells are called as subsidiary cells. Getting it? So each stomata, it is made up of a stomatal pore, then guard cell, pair of guard cells, and subsidiary cells. So what are these subsidiary cells? These subsidiary cells are surrounded and supported by the guard cell, isn't it? And they act as buffer between the guard cells and the epidermal cells, isn't it? These subsidiary cells act as a buffer between the guard cell and the epidermal cell, which function by protecting the epidermal cells against the expansion of the guard cells. Okay, you can see this is the actually structure of the stomata. There are two types of the stomata. The one, it is open stomata, and the another one, it is a closed stomata. Okay, you can see here, this is the only three components are present for formation. This is of the open stomata. To this and depending on the structure and the number of cells involved in the formation of the structure of the guard cell, there are different types of the stomata. Okay, now let us see one by one about these guard cell. Okay, shape. Now you can see the shape of the guard cell. The guard cells, these are kidney shaped or these are bean shaped. You can see here, these are the kidney shaped, bean shaped guard cells are present. And in case of the dicot, these are kidney shaped or bean shaped, but in case of the monocotyledon plant, the guard cells are dumbbell shaped, isn't it? The dumbbell shaped guard cells are found to be present in the monocot plants. If we are talking about the thickness of the guard cell wall of the guard cell, then we can find that the thickness of the cell wall of the guard cell not uniform. Or the thickness in the guard cell, the wall is thicker and the guard is thinner, and getting this is about the guard cell. Initial guard cell is thick, non-elastic guard cell. Guard cell is common increase. Guard cell fast. Guard cell different ends and all the components found in the guard cell. Okay, now the chloroplast, the chain, a strand of the chloroplast is present in the guard cell, and they perform the light reaction during the light. Now the plasmodesmata. Okay, here there is no connection between the cells. What we found in other type of the plant cell, that is each plant cell, it is in connection with the other plant cell with channel, and that channel is called as plasmodesmata. Such types of the plasmodesmata, these are not found in the guard cell, between the guard cell and subsidiary cells. Okay, so there is no connection between the guard cell and subsidiary cell with the uh, what we call as the plasmodesmata. Okay, but in fact, these cells and in contact each other, and are linked to the inner of the cells, isn't it? So this is the difference. So if the guard cell, whatever with the water, isn't it? As there is no plasmodesmata present between the guard cell and subsidiary cell, the water and the ions transmit only through the cellular pathway in the guard cell. And it helps to build up the water gradient. Later on, it helps in the opening and the closing of the guard. A really important component of the guard cell is microfibrillary organization. So, what are these microfibrils? The microfibrils are the structural components which are formed by the cellulose. So, so the little amount of body absorption or loss of water, it controls the opening and the closing of the stomata, controls the stomata. Okay, so this is all some functions of the stomata. As we discussed that the main important function of stomata is what evaporation of the water, loss of the water in the form of water vapors, isn't it? When stomata opens, the water loss takes place in the form of water vapors. If the water loss is much there and the water loss takes place through the stomata when it is open, then what is the point to close this stomata, isn't it? Or what is the point to close this stomata by the guard cell? It is very essential because the closing of the stomata, it prevents the loss of excess amount of water through the process of transpiration. You remember these 2 points. Try to understand the loss of excess amount of water, isn't it? It means that whatever with the water present in excess amount, that excess amount of water is lost through the stomata in the form of vapor when stomata opens. But the plant keeps the water necessary amount of inside the plant cell, okay, or the leaf, and to prevent excess water, excess loss of water, gardens become closed. So this function is regulated by the stomata, opening and closing. When it closes, then there is an excess loss of water, and when it opens, then there is a loss of water in the form of vapors, and that water is when water is present in the excess amount. And we try to point out these two differences. Okay. Now, what is the point of having the stomata then? Okay, the stomata allows the exchange of the gases for the photosynthesis. Now, these are the guard cells, and how do the guard cells particularly react to the availability of the water? How guard cells react to availability of the water? The guard cells react to the availability of the water when the water conditions are dry. It means that the less amount of the water is present in the plant. Then at that time, the guard cells remains closed. And when the water it is present in excess amount, abundant water is there, then guard cell becomes open. Okay, so this is the function of the guard cell. Getting it? Now the cells open and the close, then it results into the opening and the closing of the stomata. The stomata opening in the leaf surface, it allows the exchange of the CO2 and O2 in and out of the leaf, and it also helps in the process of the transpiration. Okay, so this is all about the structure of the stomata. Now, let us see the mechanism of the transpiration, overall mechanism of the transpiration, how transpiration takes place. In the process of transpiration, first of all, the absorption of the water takes place. Water is applied into the upward direction and it entered into the leaves. When it enters into the leaves from the xylem of the leaf, it is transported to the intercellular spaces. From the intercellular spaces, it is transported to the mesophyll cells. From the mesophyll cell, it will enter into the guard cell. And when the amount of water it is more in the intercellular spaces than that of the atmosphere, then at that time the guard cell opens, stomata opens, and the loss of water takes place from the intercellular spaces into the atmosphere in the form of water vapors, isn't it? So this is the process, general process of the mechanism of transpiration. Okay, now you can see here the cuticle mesophyll cell, which is shown by the second number. This is the stomata, shown by the number third. These are the guard cells, shown by number four. The function of the cuticle is to prevent the water loss. Function of the mesophyll cell, there is a cell of photosynthesis. The function of the stomata, no doubt, the stomatal opening allows the gaseous exchange and water to move in and out of the leaf. Guard cells, it regulates the opening and the closing of the stomata. Getting it? So this is all about the transpiration, types of transpiration, and the structure of the stomata. In next lecture, we will discuss about uh, the opening and the closing of the stomata, and later there are different theories which are involved in the mechanism of the opening and the closing of the stomata. All these points we will discuss in our next lecture. Till thank you for your